Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really plunging into an ancient narrative. It's from the source material connected to the Devadattavatthu.
That's right.
And our mission really is to pull out the most surprising facts, the deepest insights from this, well, frankly, wild story. It's all about ambition, power, and a pretty unexpected destiny.
It really is. Think of it as a shortcut, to getting informed on a tale that honestly feels more dramatic than fiction sometimes.
Totally.
And we have quite a rich tapestry of counts here. They detail the life and the ultimate fate of a really pivotal figure, Devadatta. He was the Buddha's cousin.
Yeah, the cousin.
And it's a story that really challenges our ideas about karma, about destiny. It's packed with surprising details, especially about the early days of the monastic community.
Mm-hmm.
What I find fascinating is how it reveals not just the external actions, but the internal stuff, the motivations, the consequences that really shape a life.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning then. How did Devadatta even become a monk? He was part of that group, right,
Yeah.
with the other Sakyan princes?
Yes, exactly. Him and 5 others, including future big names like Anuruddha and Ananda.
And this is where it gets kind of mind-boggling for me. The privilege they came from, it's almost unimaginable.
It really is. The source material paints a picture of just sheer opulence. Take Anuruddha, for example.
Okay.
He had literally never heard the words no or not available, ever.
Seriously?
Yeah. There's this story where his mother sends him an empty golden bowl to signify no cake Nathapuva.
Right.
But because of his immense past merit, these city deities instantly fill it with divine cakes.
Wow.
So he genuinely believed no cake was just, another kind of fancy dessert.
That's hard to even process. How does that kind of extreme detachment prepare you for a spiritual path?
That's the question, isn't it? And it wasn't just him.
Oh.
The sources say Kimbala thought rice just came from storerooms. Badia thought it magically appeared in cooking pots.
And Anuruddha.
Just new food showed up in a golden bowl when he felt like eating. So, yeah, incredibly pampered.
So how on earth did they end up considering ordination, giving all that up?
Well, it was their relative, Mahanama, who nudged Anuruddha towards it. He pointed out that, kind of surprisingly, not many from the Sakyan royal family had actually ordained.
Interesting.
But Anuruddha, showing maybe a lingering attachment to status, said he'd only do it if Hadiya, who was actually a king at the time, ordained first.
Ah, okay.
And then there's this really great twist with Upali, their barber.
The barber.
Yeah. They initially sent him back home with all their discarded royal jewels. But on the way, Upali has this realization. He sees these riches are, well, worthless compared to the path.
So he changed his mind.
He did. Abandons the jewels, turns around, and asks to join them.
Amazing.
And then the princes do something quite profound. They ask for Upali to be ordained before them.
Really?
As a deliberate act,
Yeah.
to humble their own Sakyan pride, to crush that sense of status right at the start.
That's a powerful move.
It really set the stage. And some, like Badia, they achieved enlightenment incredibly fast, like within the rainy season retreat. Anuruddha gained the divine eye, then full arahantship.
And Devadatta.
Devadatta gained what they call common psychic powers. Impressive, maybe, but not enlightenment.
Okay, so let's focus on Devadatta now. He has these powers, but he's feeling
Overlooked.
deeply overlooked, it seems. Imagine it. You're there, maybe you can do a few tricks, but everyone's asking for the heavy hitters, Sariputta, Moggallana,
Right.
and nobody's asking, hey, where's Devadatta?
Right.
That kind of thing must have really grated on him, given his background, maybe.
Yeah, you can see how ambition might start to fester there.
Absolutely. It looks like his motivation really came from this deep need for recognition, for power. And he saw an opening?
With Prince Arjatasattu?
Exactly. The text described the prince as someone young, maybe impressionable, who doesn't know good from bad. A perfect target, in a way.
So Devadatta cultivated him.
Meticulously. He even put on these quite dramatic displays of his psychic powers for the prince. Like what?
Appearing as a young boy, wrapped in snakes, flying, landing right in the prince's lap, then boom, back to his monk form. Really theatrical stuff.
Wow. That sounds like something designed to impress, for sure.
And it worked. He gained Ajatasattu's favor and, very importantly, his material support, resources, influence.
Okay, and this is where things really take a turn, right? With this new backing.
He gets bold, incredibly bold.
He goes to the Buddha himself.
He does, and makes this just audacious request. Basically tells the Buddha, you're old, you're worn out, step aside, let me lead the Sangha.
Unbelievable. Asking the Buddha to retire and hand it all over to him.
Pretty much. The sheer nerve of it.
How did the Buddha react?
It was a flat, very firm rejection. He even used this incredibly strong term of contempt, calling Devadatta a spittle licker kasikavada.
Ouch.
Yeah. And this wasn't just a private telling off. It was a formal public denouncement. It's called the Pakisani Kama, a clear official break.
So his big power play just completely backfired publicly.
Completely.
Yeah.
And it really makes you think, doesn't it? How do you react when your grand ambitions are just crushed like that?
Yeah.
Especially in a community supposedly built on, humility.
Well, Devadatta's reaction was extreme. He didn't just back down.
Not at all. He escalated. He started conspiring with Prince Ajatasattu. First, to kill Ajatasattu's own father, King Bimbisara.
Which Ajatasattu eventually did.
Yes. And then the plan was to kill the Buddha.
So after Ajatasattu became king, Devadatta tried to make good on that.
He did. First, he hired assassins. But here's a wild twist.
What?
The assassins, upon meeting the Buddha, were so moved by his presence they couldn't go through with it. They actually became stream enterers, reached the first stage of enlightenment.
You're kidding, the hired killers.
The hired killers. So that plan failed spectacularly.
Okay, so what next? Does he give up?
No. He decides to do it himself. He climbs Vulture Peak while the Buddha is below.
And throws a rock.
Throws a huge rock down. It splinters just before hitting the Buddha, but a fragment hits his foot.
Injuring them.
Yes, drawing blood, which is considered a really, really grave offense, injuring a Buddha.
Still, he failed to kill him.
Right. So his next attempt was even more public, more dramatic. He arranged for this notoriously fierce elephant, Nigiri.
Also called Dhanapala, right?
Exactly. He got it drunk, enraged, and then unleashed it onto the path where the Buddha was walking in the city.
That's terrifying. What happened?
Well, this is where we get that incredibly memorable detail from the texts. Ananda, the Buddha's attendant and cousin,
The ever-loyal Ananda.
he instinctively steps right in front of the Buddha, ready to sacrifice himself.
Wow. True devotion.
Absolutely. But the Buddha didn't need the physical protection. He subdued the enraged elephant purely with his loving kindness. His metta tamed it completely.
Right there in public.
Right there in front of everyone. And this spectacle, unlike the assassins or the rock, this was undeniable. Everyone saw it.
So this really exposed Devadatta's wickedness.
Glaringly. His support just evaporated. The public condemned him, and even King Ajatasattu finally withdrew his patronage.
It shows how that kind of public display of malice backfires, while the Buddha's integrity just shines through.
Exactly. Moral authority winning out over aggression.
So Devadatta's isolated now, no royal support, public opinion against him. What's his next move? He can't use force anymore.
He shifts tactics again. Tries to position himself as, more devout than the Buddha.
Oh.
He proposes these 5 extra strict rules for all monks. Things like only living in the forest, only eating alms food, wearing only rag robes, sleeping only at the foot of trees, and completely abstaining from fish and meat. Lifelong commitments.
Stricter than the Buddha required.
Yes. The Buddha said those practices were fine, commendable even, for those who chose them voluntarily. But he rejected making them mandatory for everyone.
Why?
It highlights the Buddha's emphasis on, the middle way. Individual practice, freedom, not rigid, universal dogma that might not suit everyone.
But Devadatta saw an opening there.
He did. He basically said, see, my way is purer, tougher, the Buddha's gone soft. And he used this disagreement to attract followers.
Who followed him?
About 500 monks, mainly newly ordained Vaji monks, who the texts describe rather bluntly as of dull wisdom and ungrateful.
Harsh.
It is. And he led them away to a place called Gayasya. He split the Sangha, the monastic community.
Sanghabheda.
Exactly. Sanghabheda. Considered one of the 5 most heinous acts with immediate karmic consequences.
Did the Buddha just let them go?
No. He sent his 2 chief disciples, Sariputta and Moggallana, after them.
To bring them back?
Yes. They went to Gayasya, preached to the 500 monks, and managed to persuade them all to return.
Wow, all 500.
All 500. Left Devadatta basically alone again.
How did Devadatta take that news?
Not well. And there's another dark twist here. One of his own remaining followers, a monk named Kokalika,
Yeah.
he was apparently furious that Sariputta and Moggallana had succeeded, and he blamed Devadatta somehow. He actually struck Devadatta.
Physically attacked him.
Yes, hit him hard in the chest. The texts say it caused Devadatta to vomit hot blood.
Good grief. Betrayal from within his own tiny faction.
It really foreshadowed the end, didn't it? This internal conflict, the violence turning inward.
So, what happens to Devadatta? The sources say he gets ill.
Gravely ill. For 9 months, apparently. And as he's nearing the end, he has this desire, this desperate wish to see the Buddha one last time.
Does he make it?
The Buddha, using his insight, knew beforehand that Devadatta wouldn't be able to see him, that it wasn't possible.
Why not?
The weight of his karma, perhaps. But what's really striking is what Devadatta himself says or thinks on his deathbed.
What's that?
He acknowledges it. He admits, I harbored ill will towards the Buddha, but the Buddha, he realized, had absolutely none towards me.
Wow.
He recognized the Buddha was equal-minded, treated enemies like the murderer Angulimala, or Devadatta himself, with the same baseline compassion as he treated his own son Rahula.
A deathbed realization.
Seems so. Anyway, his followers are carrying him on a stretcher towards Jetavana Monastery, where the Buddha was staying.
Trying to grant his final wish.
Right. And they stop by the pond just outside Jetavana. Devadatta wants to get down, maybe to wash himself. He puts his feet down, and the earth literally opens up and starts to swallow him.
Seriously?
That's what the texts say. First his feet, then up to his knees, his waist, his chest.
While he's still alive?
Yes, up to his jawbone. And just as he's sinking, right at the very last moment, he manages to recite a verse, taking refuge in the Buddha.
Taking refuge as he's being swallowed by the earth into hell.
It raises that profound question, doesn't it? Can you find refuge even then, after everything?
And where does he end up? The texts are pretty specific, aren't they?
Very specific. He sinks all the way down to Avīci, the lowest, most severe hell.
Avīci.
And the description is vivid. He's said to be impaled by these enormous iron stakes, one through the head to the feet, one through the back to the chest, one through both shoulders, and he's immovable.
Immovable. Why immovable?
The texts connect it directly. Because he offended the immovable Buddha, meaning the unshakable, enlightened one, his punishment is to be pinned, immovable, in hell.
A terrifyingly direct karmic consequence.
Extremely. His body is also described as being enormous, filling a huge space in Avīci.
But wait, you mentioned a twist earlier about his destiny.
Ah, yes. This is where it gets really complex and honestly quite surprising.
So despite everything, splitting the Sangha, trying to kill the Buddha, ending up in Avīci Hell, there's more.
There is. Remember how the Buddha ordained him in the first place?
Yeah, which seemed odd given what Devadatta would go on to do.
Well, the texts actually explain that. The Buddha, with his foresight, knew that if Devadatta remained a layman, his negative actions and the resulting karma would have been even worse.
Seriously, worse than attempting murder and causing a schism.
Apparently so. As a powerful layman, maybe a king's advisor or something, he could have caused even greater, wider suffering. So, paradoxically, ordaining him actually mitigated his long-term suffering, even though it led to these terrible events within the Sangha.
That's a really complex view of compassion and foresight.
It is. But here's the truly astonishing part. The Buddha made a prediction about Devadatta's far, far future.
What prediction?
That after his incredibly long time suffering in Avīci Hell is finally exhausted, 100,000 eons from now,
100,000 eons.
an almost unimaginable length of time. But after that, Devadatta will eventually be reborn and attain enlightenment on his own. He will become a Pacceka Buddha, a silent Buddha.
Devadatta, a Buddha.
A Pacceka Buddha, yes, named Atisara.
Wow. So even after all that, the path isn't entirely closed, just incredibly long and painful.
It demonstrates that even the most severe karma, according to this view, isn't necessarily eternal damnation. There's an eventual, albeit incredibly distant resolution. The potential for change, for liberation, remains.
That's a profound twist. What about the immediate aftermath? How did people react when Devadatta finally died, sinking into the earth?
The public reaction was apparently one of immense relief. They celebrated, put up flags and banners.
Celebrating his demise.
Celebrating the end of the turmoil he caused, presumably. The end of the threat to the Buddha and the Sangha. It shows how disruptive he'd become.
And the Buddha's final take on him.
His words really summarize it. Here he burns, hereafter he burns. The evildoer burns in both places. Meaning Devadatta suffered in this life through remorse, illness, betrayal, and now faces immense suffering in the next life, in Avīci. It underscores the immediate and the long-term consequences of harmful actions.
But also maybe the faint glimmer of hope from taking refuge right at the end, and that far future prediction.
Exactly. It's not simple condemnation. It acknowledges the suffering caused and endured, but also the enduring power of refuge and the ultimate potential for release, however distant.
What a story. A truly deep dive into ambition, envy, betrayal, but also these complex undercurrents of karma and compassion.
It really is.
Devadatta's journey is just such a powerful reminder, isn't it? That being close to enlightenment, even being the Buddha's cousin, doesn't guarantee you'll get it right.
Not at all. And how that relentless chase for power, for recognition, can lead to such a dramatic, terrible downfall.
Yeah.
But what's also captivating for me is that lesson embedded within it all. The, unavoidable consequences of actions, immediate and long-term.
Right. Cause and effect.
But also that surprising thread of compassion.
Right.
Even for someone who became the ultimate antagonist, the teachings offer a path, eventually, to liberation. It really makes you contemplate that intricate web, doesn't it?
It does, and the potential for change, or at least resolution, even after the most serious missteps. So it leaves us, and maybe you listening, with a question to think about. When you're faced with different paths, different influences, maybe different ways of thinking presented to you,
Yeah.
how do you tell the difference? How do you discern the path that leads to genuine wisdom and well-being from one that might look attractive, maybe even powerful?
Like Devadatta's stricter rules, perhaps.
Exactly, but is ultimately self-destructive, something to mull over.